Hello and welcome to episode 131 of the She Must Knit podcast. My name is Erin and thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. So it has been another 3 weeks. It is a Thursday. So last week, the last episode, and when I tried recording during the day, because on Thursdays Dennis does have to go into work now. So Avery's at school, Dennis is at work. It's just me and Kira. I tried it last time and it wasn't a complete disaster. It was interesting, but it wasn't a complete disaster. So the lighting is just so much better during the day. And so I thought I'd try it again. Kira is downstairs with me. She's over watching a little dinosaur show that she enjoys. So if the camera is picking up a little bit of the background noise, I apologize, but I gotta do what I gotta do, right? When this, I'm sure that won't occupy her for the whole time. So if she interrupts us, I do have plan B, which is bubbles and water and toys in the sink in the bathroom, which will be a bit of a disaster for me to deal with later, but it will probably keep her busy. So we'll see how this goes. Right now, she's happily watching a show. So yeah, thank you for coming back and checking out what I've been working on. I've got my little list here of the goals that I had from the last episode, what I thought I might finish, what I might be working on. So I'll update you on those. I also have some new things, but before I get into all of that, I do want to do a little tiny shop update because we're coming up on another club shipment. So the July shipment, my mystery club, I have a mystery club in my shop available that goes all year. It's every 2 months. I just shipped out the May shipment recently, so the next one coming up is the July shipment, and this year's theme is most colorful creatures, so all the shipments are based on very colorful animals, and the July one is going to be on the fairy wrasse. So I'm going to pop up the picture there of the color inspiration. You can see that. So I mentioned, I think in a previous episode, that I'm trying to dye extra 1 or 2 things to put up in the shop at a later date, and I did in fact do that for May shipment, which was the sloth. So that will be coming up in a bit. I'm not going to do it right after the club ships, but maybe in 2 months. But that means that the extra lot that I dyed up for the what would have been March shipment is now going to be in the shop, and that was the sunset moth. So this is the little lot that will be up available in the shop now from the sunset moth, and then yeah, the stuff that I made for the sloth shipment will show up at a later date. But the listing for the fairy wrasse is still open, as is the there's a bundle for the last 3 months of the year. So the July shipment, the September shipment, and the November shipment, you can get in a bundle at a reduced shipping rate. That is still available. After the July shipment goes out, it will just be available by the month. So this is the last bundle option. So I just wanted to update you guys on what's going on with that. And yeah, let's start getting into what I've been working on. So I've got my little paper here. Oh, I should mention, you might notice that I am wearing my trestle tee that I showed you in the last episode. I'm trying to, it's just been sitting to the side. I've mentioned before that I have trouble wearing my knits, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of like break that seal and just wear it for the day, see how I feel about it. I even tried to coordinate my lipstick. It's not an exact match, but I think it's pretty close. And just, yeah, see how it feels. We're not doing much today. I think later on we're going to be going to the farmer's market. But other than that, because Dennis has the car at work, we're just kind of hanging out around the house for most of the day. So we'll see how this goes. Like I said, I do like the color, and I do like the design. I have a habit of not wearing my knits, so we'll see how that goes. So from the last episode, my goals for this episode, I thought I was going to finish Evan's socks. I was going to finish Ian's socks. I was going to work more on the chameleon and possibly get 2 legs done. I was probably going to cast on another pair of socks because I knew I was going to be finishing socks. I mentioned that I was going to be making Kira a dinosaur toy, and I figured that would be finished by now. And yeah, so those were my goals. So I have completed some of the goals, but there's a bunch of goals that I actually did not meet, but I did work on other things that I was not planning to work on, so that's kind of exciting. What shall we start with? Let's just start with the finished socks. Should we just do a whole sock segment and then go into the other things? Because I have some socks. I have a pair of socks that are done, and I have other things that I've started. I think we'll do that. Let's just talk about socks for now, and then I'll move on to the other things. So I thought I was going to finish both Evan's socks and Ian's socks for this episode, but I only finished one of them, which is fine. So these are the pair of socks that I have finished for my brother Ian. These are on my Crafty bingo card. I like to try and make them. In the past, I've made them multiple pairs of socks for Christmas the last couple of years, with just my time being taken up with Kira. Like they've been getting one pair of socks per year, but this year I think they're going to get more than one pair. So this is Ian's, and so at this point, no, I was going to say at this point all my brothers have a pair of socks, but that is not true. I'm still working on Evan's. But yeah, I've already finished Owen's socks. These are Ian's socks. I'll be finished Evan's socks, and then I'm going to be starting another round of socks for them. I'd really like to have multiple pairs of socks for Christmas for them this year. But these are Ian's socks, and I had mentioned before that when I saw them at Easter, I asked them if there was, any kind of colors that they wouldn't mind, and my brother Ian said something, anything that's darker. So this is something that I pulled out of my stash. Now, I did show, pretty sure I showed you guys the label and the yarn for this, the speckle in the last episode. I can't find it. I've already gotten rid of the label. And then this one here was something that I over dyed. So I'm trying to think, can I remember what it was? I really can't remember what it was. If you're really interested, in the last episode I do mention what this is. So I had this speckle in my stash. I've had this for years and years and years and years. And then I looked through my stash and I had this to go with it just for I did the toes. You can see I did the toes there. I could have done the little heel bit, but I didn't do that for these, and then I did the cuff. This was a mystery yarn that I received in a mystery box that wasn't quite the colors that I normally like to work with, so I over dyed it in a dark green, and you can still kind of see some of the colors showing through there. I think originally it was like a bright lime green and a yellow, and then by over dyeing it with a darker green, you can still kind of see those colors popping through, but it's just not quite so right. I think it goes really well with the colors in this speckled yarn. And I did mention last time too, and this can happen with speckled yarns depending on the dye application, but I was working on the first sock. So I think in the last episode did I have the first sock done, or was it almost done? I don't remember. But I noticed that at the top of this first sock, the speckles were much more concentrated, and then it kind of tapered out, and I wasn't sure what the second sock was going to do. And you can see it kind of maintained this concentration of speckling throughout the entire sock. So just this one is kind of more heavily speckled at the top there. I think it's okay though. Yeah, I don't think my brother will care. When you're wearing socks with pants and stuff, you don't really see the top of the sock anyway. So yeah, those are done. So pleased with those. I think I've mentioned before that my brother's socks, I always start with 72 stitches, 2x1 rib, and then I do a plain stockinette, a strong heel, and then I do 75 rows for the foot until the toe. All my brothers have the same size feet approximately, so I can do the same kind of numbers for all of them. So the other pair of socks that I was working on last time that I thought I was going to finish this time were for my brother Evan. And I was using 2 yarns, and I was doing micro stripe socks, because you guys know this year is going to be the year you're going to be seeing lots of micro stripe socks. I want to experiment with different yarn combinations to kind of see what the effects are. So for him, I was using a striping yarn. So this here's a striping yarn. Again, I'm pretty sure I had the label, and I told you guys what the yarn was in the last episode. I don't know what I did with it. So, but it was I think a UK yarn dyer that I was not familiar with. And then again, this one is a skein that I had in my stash. Again, it was from a mystery box, and it was colors that I just wasn't going to use. I think it was like a primary red, blue, and yellow. And I over dyed it with a brown to kind of act as a nice contrast to go with this one. So, and I did actually, I want to thank you guys. So in the last episode, I asked you, how important it was to know all the details of the yarn, because I know a lot of podcasts that, the yarn dyers and the yarn name and the color name and all that stuff and how important that was, because I'm pretty much using my stash this year, and so a lot of it's really old and not available anymore. And then also my labels go everywhere. My labels go everywhere. I don't always have them. I don't always have the information. So I asked you guys how important it was to know like the exact details, and thank you for those who responded. The general consensus seemed to be, and this is kind of how I feel too when I watch podcasts. I just need to know, like, the weight of yarn, what kind of yarn it is. One of you said, the dye technique used, because that's what you're going to be using. If it's a project that you want to try, you're going to be using that kind of information. Like, is it a striping yarn? Is it a speckled yarn? Is it, a tonal yarn or a variegated yarn? What kind of dye technique was used to get the same effect? And that information is more valuable. And that's when else also said, sometimes you can't even get the yarns. If you live in a different part of the world, you can't even get the yarns. So I'm going to try to make a point of talking more about what the qualities of the yarns are versus the exact yarns, because again, sometimes I don't have the labels, sometimes they're discontinued, etc. So this, like I said, is another pair of microstripe socks that I'm working on. And I have done microstripe socks in the past using a striping yarn and then a contrast solid, and I really, really enjoy the effect of that. So you can kind of see that here. I'm still working on the first sock. I thought I would finish, well, obviously my goals were I thought I was going to finish both socks, but I thought at least I would finish the first one. But you'll see I was distracted by other things. But yeah, I really like how the micro stripe technique, she's not watching her show anymore. I think we're going to have a visitor in a minute. I'm going to have to pull out the bubbles. But I really like how this technique works with a dark or just a very contrasting solid yarn and then a striping yarn. It just breaks up the stripes. It makes it very addictive to knit. When I do sit down and work on this, I'm just like doing row after row after row after row. I think it's also because each row is a different yarn and the rows go by fairly quickly. It's like I finish a solid row and then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just do one more row. And I finish, a row from the striping yarn. And then I'm like, well, I'm already here, let's just do another row. So I do a solid row, and then it's like, well, okay, let's do another row. And it just on and on and on and on. And it just makes for a very fast knit. And here she is. What are you doing? Oh, you got your chair? Do you want to say hi? You want to say hi? Who do you got? T-Rex. You got your T-Rex. Is he your favorite? Yeah, he goes everywhere with you. Does T-Rex want to say hi? Does T-Rex want to say hi? Okay, say hi, T-Rex. I don't hear him. He's just breathing. You say hello. No. Okay, Mommy's gonna finish doing this. Do you want to go play with bubbles?
T-Rex not excited.
Does T-Rex want to play with bubbles? No, you don't want to play with bubbles? Do you want to play with bubbles in the sink? No. Well, there goes plan B. You don't want to play with bubbles? Your bubbles machine? And water? And your dinosaurs? You want to go see? Okay. We're going to go see if that will work. And I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've got her set up in the bathroom. And I want to say, okay, if you've got kids and they love bubbles, and you live near or have access to a Dollarama, I don't know if they have Dollaramas in the US, but in Canada they have Dollaramas. There's Dollaramas everywhere. We were there the other day and they had this bubble maker gun thing, and it's battery operated, and I thought it was one that you put the solution in and then it just made bubbles. It's not. But you just have to dip it in the bubble solution, and then when you push a button, it makes thousands of bubbles. And Kira's 3 and she's able to operate it. Now, she does sometimes, she doesn't always get that you have to, not spill the bubble solution. But if you can get a good enough container that kind of stays put and she can dip, it keeps her busy, for a while. And because she can operate it herself, I'm not sitting there, blowing bubbles all the time. It's great. So if you have a kid or kids who love bubbles, and you go to a Dollarama, have a look in their, seasonal summer pool water aisle. And yeah, it was just a couple dollars, and I'm hoping that it will help. She'll take it outside and she'll just blow bubbles everywhere. She'll put them in the water. She does all kinds of stuff with them. So that's what she's doing in the bathroom right now. Yeah, she's blowing bubbles in the sink, and she's got toys and stuff. So we'll see how long that lasts. So I was talking about Evan's socks. And yeah, how when I'm doing the microstripe socks with a striping yarn and a contrast yarn, I just really like that effect. So yeah, I'm still working on the first sock. You can see I've got the heel done, so strong heel. This is my preferred heel. You're going to pretty much see it in all my socks. And then I'm down the foot and I've got my little markers in, and it looks like I'm about 50 rows into the foot. And like I said, I do 75 for my brother's socks. So if I put a decent amount of work into these, like over a day, I could finish the sock no problem, and then get the second sock going. And then once that's done, all my brothers will at least have their first set of, like, their first pair of socks. So yeah, another one of my goals, because I thought I was going to finish both of those, was that I was going to have at least one pair of socks cast on. And I did. I've actually, yeah, you'll see I cast on 2 pairs of socks because I'm back to enjoying socks this year. But I wanted to get another pair of socks for my brother's done. And I started back at the beginning, so I made Owen's pair first, and then I made Ian's pair, and then I'm working on Evan's pair, so I kind of went back and let's cast on another pair for Owen. And the first pair I made him at the beginning of the year was just with this plain striping yarn. So I was like, well, you know, it looks like all my brothers are going to have like microstripe socks or something. So let's cast on a pair of microstripe socks for him. And I did. So I had been eyeing this yarn combination. Every time I've gone into my stash kind of looking at yarns to kind of pair together. These 2 skeins really kind of like caught my eyes, like, oh, I think that's going to make a really, really interesting mix. And I actually do have some yarn labels for this one. So I'm combining this yarn here, which is from Fido Designs, and I got this back in a yarn box. Like, who of you remember yarn box? Were you ever subscribed to yarn box? I had the yarn box, the regular yarn box, for a little bit, and then they also had the yarn box socks, which I really enjoyed, and I think that's what this skein was from. So yeah, this is just fingering weight yarn, nice speckled. It's kind of like I don't know if I would call this speckled, because the way it's dyeing up, it's not really variegated. It's kind of a speckly variegated yarn. I really like how it's working up. But I had this one, and then I had this set of 50 grams that I had bought during a yarn crawl, and this is from Dragon Strings, and I know for sure Dragon Strings is still dyeing because they are Canadian dyer, and they go to a lot of the same shows that I go to, especially the berry show. I know for sure they're there. Actually, I think they go to most of the shows. So I picked this up from a berry yarn shop, and it was just a little set of 50 grams. I think they had a theme for that summer, and it was like this lizard or something like that, this blue and green lizard. So that's why these 2 colors were put together. But when I saw these 2 and I saw this, I was like, I really liked how kind of both of these colors are represented in this yarn, kind of. Like, they just, yeah, I thought they kind of complemented each other really well. And I thought, how fun would it be to try doing some microstripes with the speckly yarn being the main yarn, and then the solid yarn being kind of the middle yarn. So I have found when doing microstripe socks, usually for whatever yarn I'm going to use for the cuff, and then throughout the sock, and then the toe, and then if I do the little the heel flap in that yarn, I need about 100 grams. I don't use the full 100 grams, but I need like 100 gram skein for that. And then whatever yarn I'm using for the middle part of the sock, like just the leg of the sock, I don't need more than 50 grams. So I can easily use a 50 gram skein for the leg of the sock, and then 100 grams. I need 100 grams for the contrast. So I thought, how fun would it be if I used the speckly yarn as kind of like the main skein that runs throughout the entire sock, and then each of the socks are going to have a different contrast. So I'm going to do one sock where this is the contrast through the leg of the sock, and then the second sock will have this yarn as the contrast through the leg of the sock. So I did start them, and I'm not terribly far in them, but you can kind of see the effect that I'm getting. So here's the speckly yarn as the cup, and you can see that it's not as speckly as like some of the other yarns, but I wouldn't call it like a true variegated. I don't know, it's kind of like in a middle ground. But here it is with the aqua color. I've started with the aqua as the leg. Now I had mentioned before when I was doing my mom's microstripe socks that I had started hers with like a solid and a speckle, and I wasn't enjoying it as much because I didn't think it really showcased the speckle, and also because it didn't change, I didn't find it as kind of like addictive to knit. And I thought, this is probably going to be the same thing, but I think because I don't know, they just have a different look then, but using the speckle as the cuff and by having the two different yarns in the legs, I still think that they're going to be fun to get through. So I have enjoyed working on these, and I don't think that it detracts too much from the speckle because you can see the speckle, you can see what the speckle looks like here, and then it just kind of fades out into the leg. So that's what that's looking like. And then yeah, we'll have to see what the second sock looks like with the green as the contrast, and then how the two look together. I think it's going to be kind of neat. And I do plan on using the aqua color. Do I want to use the aqua or the speckle for the little heel flap triangle thing? I don't know. The speckle might look stand out more, or do I want the speckle? I don't know. I'm gonna have to decide when I get there. But well, yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that. But yeah, I thought these would be kind of fun, and then that way my brother Owen gets a pair of micro stripy socks. And then, so after that, so I had these two socks going, and I was like, okay, working on 2 pairs of socks works pretty well for me. However, because both of these pairs are micro striped, and they had the 2 yarns attached all the time. And when I'm working like at my desk and stuff, it's no problem. Like I don't mind alternating the balls as I go. But I was like, you know what? So the weather's getting nicer now, and Kira and I have been going to the park more days during the week. And she's at the point now where she's pretty independent. Like I can go and she'll just play on the equipment. She doesn't need a lot of, she doesn't need me like right there watching her and being like on her all the time on the equipment, because she's pretty self-sufficient with climbing and sliding and all that kind of stuff. She can do a lot on her own now. And so I've been starting to bring my knitting with me so that if she's has a moment where she's occupied, she's lying in the grass picking dandelions, watching ants, I don't know, I can work on my socks a little bit. However, I realized microstriped socks with the 2 balls are not the most convenient to take out when you're knitting out and about. And so I thought, you know what, I should probably cast on another pair of socks that's just like a one, like where I'm only working from 1 ball at a time, so that it'll be much easier to kind of grab and go. I needed a pair of grab and go socks, and so that's what I did. I decided to cast on another pair. And because I've been working, I'm like, okay, I really want to have at least 2 pairs of socks for each of my brothers. I'm working on Owen's second pair. Ian has his first pair. I'm working on Evan's first pair. So at first I was trying to find another pair to make for Ian, but there wasn't a yarn that I only wanted to work on. Because I did a speckly pair for him, I kind of want to do a microstripe pair for him, and that would defeat the whole purpose. If I cast on those, that would mean that I'd have 3 microstripe socks on the go, and the whole point of casting on a third pair was to have a grab and go sock. So I was like, okay, Evan's pair I'm working on are microstripe, so let's try and find a non-microstripe yarn that I can work on for Evan. And that's what I did. I went through all my yarn. I had mentioned that he kind of, when I asked him what kind of colors he had in mind, he was like, maybe something reds. I don't have a lot of reds. But I found something in so this is like where my main yarn that that inspires me, the yarn that I really want to work with is there. And then I have some bins over here that have a lot of other yarns, like more commercial yarns, acrylic yarns, kind of workhorse yarns, like specific purpose yarns, and then also any like leftover bits that are big enough that I could use for another project. They go into like bins that are that way. So I was looking through the bin that I have of solid yarns. So solid yarns that I have from leftovers that are big enough to do something with. You get the idea. To see if I had any contrast yarns to pair with something else. And I ended up finding something for both the contrast and the main yarn. So this is the yarn that I found that I would use as the contrast. I have no idea what this is. So this is just like a tonal, I don't know, it's kind of like a reddish orange. It's not quite red, it's not quite orange. But yeah, it's just a tonal yarn. I don't know if this came like this, or if this is one of if this is something that I overdyed. This brings back absolutely no recollection of where I got it, when I got it, what I used it for. Obviously I made something with it, but I have no idea. But it's just your standard, it's a standard fingering weight, super washable nylon yarn. And then in the same bin, I found this sock blank. And again, it's not quite red, but I mean, there's red components to it. Like, it's reddish. It's also some pinks and some oranges and stuff like that and some navies. But I found this in that bin as well. Now, I know that this is one of the sock blanks that I've dyed, but I have no idea why it was in the bin. Because usually if I'm dyeing a sock blank, it's to sell. Like, I very rarely dye yarn for myself to use because I have enough yarn that I can pull from my stash. And also, like, I like to use the yarn that I dye for the shop. Like, I don't want to take inventory from my shop unless there's something specific that I had in mind. So I have a feeling that there was something wrong with this sock blank, that I couldn't sell it, but also it's still a perfectly usable, like, it's perfectly usable, but there was something about it that flawed, that I couldn't sell it. I don't know what that was, but that's the only reason I can think of that I would have put this aside, because I mean, it's still interesting. It's not like I dyed it and was like, oh, this is such an ugly sock blank, no one's gonna want to buy this. Yeah, I have no idea, but I thought, you know what, it's been in there, I don't know how long it's been in there for, let's use it, it might be fun. And I thought it would pair nicely with that contrast that I found. So this is how it is working up so far. You can see I've got my little cuff started, I've gotten into the leg, but we are getting into more where we're getting kind of spots and speckles of the color. So I don't know if it's going to change much, but it'll be interesting to see. That's one of the fun things about sock blanks, is because yeah, the dye is not done in a very, it's just the way that the dye is applied, you're not going to get an even distribution of color throughout the whole project. And so who knows what the rest of this sock is going to look like. But I like how it's working up. It's fun to work with. I enjoy knitting from sock blanks, and so that's what I decided to cast on for Evan's second sock and my on-the-go sock. And yeah, this one's nice when, even if I'm just working on socks at home and I'm like, I just want to knit out a sock and not have to think about rotating the yarn for the microstripes. It's nice having that project to work on. So I think that is all the socks. I'll just quickly mention, because I know I don't mention this every time, if you're a new viewer, I like to work on my socks on 2mm needles. That's just the gauge that I like on my socks. I like a nice dense sock. That's another question for you guys. How important is it for you guys to know the needle sizes on the projects that I'm working on? Because I've never, like, when I've watched other podcasts and they talk about like what needle size they're working on, I feel like maybe that's helpful for some people, but because gauge, like, everybody's gauge is so individual. Like, I know what kind of gauge I tend to get with projects. Like, I tend to be right on the nose. If I use a 4mm needle with a DK weight yarn, my gauge is going to be 22 stitches per 4 inches or whatever. Like, I tend to be right on the nose. So if someone's working on a pattern and I look at that pattern and it calls for, worsted weight on a 5mm, I know I can use that 5mm because my gauge tends to be spot on. And I have a feeling that if you are someone who knits tighter or looser, like, you know that about yourself, so you already kind of know, okay, well, if they're working on this with this kind of needle and this kind of yarn, I will have to adjust for this. So this is important for you guys to know what size needles that I'm using on certain things, or do you just kind of, extrapolate from that, like, what you would need if you were to use on that project, or if you went to look at it, you would, be able to figure that out, or like, yeah. How important is needle sizes? Because yeah, I know that most people use, is it a 2.5 for socks? Is that like the standard needle that people, 2.25 or 2.5? I know I don't use a standard sock needle because I like a tighter gauge. And that's why I use more stitches. Oh, I have a feeling that she's coming in. All right, I'm gonna have to figure out a plan C. Okay, back. Plan B was still working. She had just run out of bubble mixture. I have a feeling that she spilled it. She's 3. That's just what she's going to do, and I know that. Bubble mixture is something that I tend to stock up on for the summer because we go through a lot of it. So she's back in there happily playing with her little bubble gun. Okay, so I think I've showed you all the socks, and so let's get into the other projects. Should we do some finished objects of things let's go into finished objects. I have a couple finished things, and then I have some other things that I've been working on. So let's start with one that I wasn't planning on doing, and I don't know why I decided to just buckle down and do this, but one of the squares on my bingo card is to make 6 dishcloths, and I know that it doesn't take me very long to do dishcloths, like if I actually focus on them. I'm like, let's just knock that square out. So I decided to take a couple of days and just sit down with my dishcloth cotton and just try and knock those dishcloths out so I could like knock off that square, and that's what I did. So I picked out I do my dishcloths the same all the time. Dishcloths are not something that I enjoy necessarily making, but I enjoy giving them as gifts and I enjoy using them, and so I'm not really interested in, you know, finding different patterns and doing fancy designs. I just want the cloth. For me, it's more important the density of the cloth and the size of the cloth. I like, for my personal use, I like one that's not too big. I find really big dishcloths kind of like cumbersome to use. I like a smaller, not too small, but a smaller cloth. So I had picked out a one of my dishy, I think it was even last year or the year before, I don't know. At some point I did like a large knit picks order, and I ordered a whole bunch of dishy, their dishcloth cotton. And so I had picked out this color. I usually like to pair I do like to do my dishcloths in sets, and I like to have a variegated and then a solid and then a you know, one of those like scrubby yarns to mix in and make a scrubber dishcloth. So I had picked out this yarn here, or this color. I picked out a solid gray to go with it, and then I picked out a scrubby yarn. So I ended up making, I think, 2 sets. We've got this large one, and then, so I usually do one large dishcloth. I do one that's slightly smaller or slightly bigger. Where are we here? Okay, this is my big dishcloth. Now this for me would be too big for me, but I usually do one big dishcloth, and then I do one smaller dishcloth, and that's more the size that I like. And then I do a scrubby dishcloth where I mix the cotton in with, I don't know if you can see like the texture poking out there. I mix the cotton, I hold the cotton yarn together with the scrubby nylon-y dishcloth yarn to make a scrubby cloth. So that would be one kind of coordinating set. And then I have another one. Did I get more? I got more than 6 dishcloths out of these yarns. And then for this one, I think, is there a big one? No, I just have 3 kind of smaller ones. So I have 2 of this size in the variegated, and then I have a solid in the same size. I might keep one of these since I have 4. I have a solid, and then I have a little scrubby. So this one, it looks like I didn't do the border, and in this one I tried adding a border of the solid around. I'm not sure which one. I guess this looks more finished, but like this is a nice size for like a scrubby cloth. So yeah, I think I might keep one of these variegated ones for myself. But yeah, so when I'm doing a dishcloth, because I use the same pattern every single time, I usually cast on, and I think I made these notes. I started a project page on my Ravelry for 2023 dishcloths, because I have a feeling I'm going to try and make some more this year, and I kind of wrote down what I do for my dishcloths there if you're like really interested. But I do all my dishcloths the same. So I usually start by chaining either between 15 and 20 stitches, depending on if I want a smaller size or a larger size. And then I just do single crochet. So I chain my, like, say 15 stitches, and I do single crochet back and forth until when I measure the width of the dishcloth, then the height matches it. So I measure this, and let's say I was like, oh, it's 6 inches. Then I just keep doing single crochet until the height is also 6 inches. And then I start going around the border. I do 1 row of single crochet all the way around, and then I do another row of slip stitch. And you can see that that gives it this little kind of edging here that goes around. That's the slip stitch. So then I do 1 row of the slip stitch, and then I cut my yarn and weave in all my ends. And that just gives me a very plain, very, you know, purposeful little dishcloth. Nothing fancy, but they're quick. That way they're quick. I can do, if I have time, I can definitely do one in a day. Sometimes I can do, you know, 1.5, 2 in a day, depending on the time that I have. So they do make for nice, quick little gifts. So I have this little pile here. I have 7 dishcloths that I was able to make with 3. Actually, I didn't even use the whole scrubby yarn. Do I have the scrubby yarn? I have this much of the scrubby, and I think Bernat, I know a couple of different dishcloth kind of brand yarns make the scrubby yarn. I have a feeling that this was like a Bernat yarn, but yeah, it's just, they're called scrubbies or whatever. They're pretty easy to find at Walmart in the dishcloth section. I like to buy a couple different colors so that they can coordinate with different cottons. So yeah, I did that. So I took a couple of days. I just got that done, knocked that square off. And then the other finished object that I have, this one's pretty exciting. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. So if you remember in the last episode, right near the end, when I was talking about my goals, I was saying how I really wanted to make another stuffed toy for Kira. And she's really into dinosaurs. She loves her dinosaurs. Her favorite dinosaur is the Pachycephalosaurus. And it is pretty much impossible, other than like the hard like figurine toys. It is very difficult to find dinosaur toys, or dinosaur anything really. Here she comes again. Okay, we have moved on to Plan C, and she's playing with her kinetic sand and her dinosaurs. So hopefully that will keep her busy for the last little bit that I need to get through my last couple of projects. So I was talking about the Pachycephalosaurus and how it's really hard to find Pachycephalosaurus toys, especially stuffed toys. I remember looking online, and the only ones I could find were from the UK. I don't even know if they were still available. They were kind of like older things. I can't find anything in Canada. And if I did, it was like just way too expensive for what I was willing to pay. So I looked on Etsy, and I found, I just did a search. I was like, can I find a dinosaur pattern? I'm pretty comfortable sewing. I have sewn from like toy patterns before. I don't know if you remember, like, tell me if you had home ec in elementary school, but we had home ec, and I remember there being a woodworking component, and there might have been, was there a kitchen component? I don't remember. But I do remember that there was also a sewing component. So I remember there being this catalog, and you could pick out different kind of toy kits. And I remember doing a couple of those. So I am familiar with like putting like the pattern pieces together and how to manipulate that in making like an actual toy, not just my little flat things that are my go-to just because they're so darn easy. So yeah, there was one afternoon that I checked out Etsy to see if I could find a PDF for a dinosaur stuffy that was kind of generic looking enough that I could kind of alter it or add details to it to look like a Pachycephalosaurus, because really the main feature of that dinosaur that makes it stand out is like the helmet head with the spikes and stuff. And then, you know, I think a lot of the toys that I looked on online had like a nose horn. So I was like, okay, if I can find a pattern that just looks dinosaur-esque and I can figure out a way to add that helmet and nose horn, it should look enough like a Pachycephalosaurus that that's what she'll think it is. And I did find one, and oh my goodness, I forget what the Etsy store was called. I'll put it down on the bottom here. But I was really pleased with the pricing. Like, I don't want to say that, you know, patterns shouldn't be so expensive, but sometimes when you just want to make something on a whim, you don't necessarily want to pay $20 for a pattern for something that you're going to make once. And so I liked that they had, like, it looked like their more simple patterns were about $5. So this dinosaur pattern that I found, I'll put the picture of the original dinosaur up in the corner here. So this was just, it was just like dinosaur toy. It wasn't any specific dinosaur. And it was about $5 Canadian. And it was labeled as, you know, pretty beginner friendly pattern. And it looked like the type of shape that I could add details to make it what I wanted. And so I bought the pattern, and I had mentioned last time that I had emailed the pattern to Dennis, and because he was at work that day, I asked him to print it, and if he did do that, I was hoping that night I'd be able to make the toy. And that's what I did. Now, I will say, I gave him specific instructions. Now, I won't totally fault him, because sometimes, you know, different printers and different, like, things, they're not very clear. But I did say, you have to print the pattern actual size, like the pattern specified print actual size, so that all the pieces would be the proportion that the designer intended them to be. And I think Dennis just like printed the files without adjusting the size. But luckily the pattern came with one of those little squares on it that said, you know, this square should, if the sizing is correct, this square should measure 1 inch. And I measured it, and it did not measure 1 inch. It was smaller, but only by a bit. So I figured, you know what, I might be able to upsize these pieces manually. Like, I cut them all out, and I made like a little like gauge kind of thing, and I put that gauge all the way around each piece so that I was like upsizing it in the same amount all the way around. And I just crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. I was hoping that it would work enough, that the pattern pieces would still kind of fit together the way they were supposed to as I followed them. And for the most part they did. So again, so I showed you the original pattern. It was the pattern was written in a very easy to understand way. It walked you through all the different steps, how the pieces should be when you put them together, what you should sew first, you know, what openings you should leave. I was very pleased with how the pattern was written. And so I finished it in an evening, and I'll just show you here. This is what it ended up looking like before I added all the details. So this was just my version of this dinosaur pattern, just generic dinosaur. Now I understand that it doesn't look exactly like the original photo, but also I think they used like a cotton fabric in the original, which has a bit more, less stretch, and I used a fleece, which has a bit more stretch. And also because I had to manually upsize the pieces, they might not have been in the exact proportion that the original pattern was intended. But it worked. I had a dinosaur toy, and I was able to add the features that I was able to figure out the features, and this is what we ended up with. So you can see I was able to add this little muzzle guy and then a little horn, and all of these were, I think this I had to sew in 2 pieces, and then everything was just stitched on. So I just stitched them right on the top, and that is one of the things that I remembered from the home ec sewing portion and doing those little stuffies, was the different kind of stitching techniques, so that things like when you sewed up a seam, that it would be invisible, and also like stitching these pieces on to the top, like there's not a lot of thread showing. So that is something that I pulled away from that class way back in grade 8. So yeah, this muscle took me a couple of tries to get kind of the right proportion and shape to get on there. But yeah, I gave him that. I gave him his little nose horn. And then I've got his little helmet. And I think this might have taken me a couple of tries too, because I was trying to do something more complicated. Or maybe this didn't. This only took me 2 tries. But then I tried to use the same technique with the 2 pieces for the helmet. And that was just, it was too pointy, and then I realized really all I had to do was a circular piece and then stuff it, because it didn't have to be like huge. And yeah, and then I got the little horns, put the little horns in, stuffed it on, gave it a little, you know, sewed it, stitched it, and yeah, that's how it looks. I think it looks, you know, he's got a nice battle head there. I think it looks Pachycephalosaurus like enough, and I really like how, like, the details, like the reason I wanted to follow a pattern is that I knew I wanted it to be more 3-dimensional versus just like the flat pieces that I did. And I really like how this designer kind of put together. None of the pieces were overly complicated, none of the shapes were overly complicated, but I think the end result is pretty I don't want to say professional looking, because I mean I don't know if it's professional looking, but it looks like it could be an actual toy versus something that, you know, I just whipped up. So I'm happy with how it turned out. I even gave him, you know, little eyelids to add a little bit of detail there, and she seems to like him. He has not taken the place of the T-Rex. The T-Rex is her buddy, and I think that also has to do with the size of T-Rex. T-Rex is just the perfect size. He's not too big. Like this guy, he's a little big, but she does play sometimes with this one and her Stegosaurus and her T-Rex. She has accepted it as a toy, so that's the main thing. So yeah, I was very pleased with how that turned out, and that pattern designer actually does have a few other patterns that are really nice. It's not all dinosaur toys. They have a couple different animals. I remember there was like some simple ones, some very simple ones for like beginners. They had a whale. They had some other They had a couple of other dinosaur designs. I remember there being a pretty nice looking whale. But it wasn't a huge catalog. I could see if I really wanted to make another toy and they had a toy that fit what I want to make, I would purchase from them again. So that was the dinosaur. That was my Pachycephalosaurus. I think that's my last finished object to share with you. And then I have 2 projects that I'm still working on. One of them you saw in the last episode, and one of them, it's not brand new, it's not a new cast on, it's one that I've pulled out of the vault. I think some of you longtime viewers will be very excited to see this, but I just decided this is something that I really want to finish this year. And so I pulled that out. And I think that's why this next project didn't get as much work as I was hoping to. So let's start with this one. I'm going to show you my chameleon. So I had started this in the last episode as part of, so for my bingo card, I think it's the second part of the one that's 2 patterns from PDFs that I already had in my library. And this PDF I bought way back in like 2015, 16, 17, that time period. And it's just something that I just really wanted to make for myself. I'm probably going to put them on my shelf back there. And when I showed it to you last time, I had the 2 pieces done. So the way that this is made, you have your right side and your left side. And I think I had those 2 pieces done. And then I had joined the tail. So I think this was still open. I still had them on all the needles, the 2 sets of needles last time. And I had just, I had connected the tail, but I hadn't grafted it, because that's what I did these last couple of nights. And I think in my goals, I thought I was going to have 2 of the legs done on this guy. And after grafting the tail, I was like, no, I don't have the patience for the limbs quite yet. So for this tail, you had to graft all the way from the tippy top all the way across here. This was all grafting. This was all Kitchener stitch. It ended up being 125 stitches. So I had to kind of do it in segments. I wasn't able to do it in one night. And so, with Kitchener stitch, you kind of have to like know where you are in the Kitchener stitch. And so yeah, that was a little bit time consuming. That was a little bit brain involving. I don't know what is going on with this tail. Like in the picture, it looks like it's like this perfect spiral. And I don't know if I just did it too tight or it's just the tip is like this, but I don't know. I like this part is behaving. This is like, curled like a chameleon tail. But then he's got like this little spiral. I think I might end up like stitching a little bit of this. I think I want the tail to kind of stay in this position. So I might end up stitching this when I'm done. But we'll see. I'm going to finish it. We'll see how it looks. And then I'll work on it. But I might just like stitch that down. I don't know how I feel about that. But yeah, I've got the tail done. And then after you did all the Kitchener stitch for the tail, you did a 3-needle bind off to connect the right side and left side. And that gives you this ridge. And when I was looking further on in the pattern, it looks like there's a step where I then pick up stitches from this ridge and make the little, like the little scaly fins down the back. So that is the next step. After that, the pattern had you do the legs, and I was looking at the legs last night. I was reading the directions to see, okay, is this something that I can do tonight, or am I going to have to wait? The way this pattern is designed, everything is row by row by row by row, and there's lots of short, like wraps and turns and stuff, short rows. And so what I find I have to do is I have to write out the numbers for all the rows, and then as I do them, I have to like tick them off so I know exactly where I am. And the same thing with the legs. So I'm like, I do not have the brain space or the time and that evening to kind of focus on the legs. So yeah, I haven't tackled the legs yet. And actually, you're supposed to do the 4 legs next and then the head. And what I'm thinking I might do is I'll do the head next and I'm going to do the legs last. Because the head, it looks like you just pick up along this edge here. And then again, there's lots of short wrap and turns and short rows to shape the head. But the head comes out of like this area here. And there's nothing that, like, doing the head first is not going to interfere with the legs or the leg placement, because the legs are done individually, and then you actually insert and you create an armature with wire. And I do have some wire that I bought for like the garden, and it's like this rubber coated wire for like plants and stuff. I think it would be perfect for this. But you create these little armatures that you stick into the legs so that you can like mold them, and the legs then the armatures then get stuck through these little holes. You see there's one there. When I was doing this pattern, I was like, why are there these random holes on each corner? There's one there, there's one over here, and then there's like one up here. There's like just, you had to do these yarn overs, and I was like, why are these random holes in these places? Now I know, it's to stick the armatures in. But yeah, so I think I'm going to do the head next, and then I will worry about the legs. And then I think after the legs, it's just stuffing and doing the wire work and all that kind of stuff. So if I can figure out how to dedicate some time and brain space to this project, I could see this being done in maybe 2 more episodes. I don't think it'll be done for the next episode. But yeah, that's how it's looking. I really like how this yarn is working out for this pattern. I mentioned last time how when I was looking through the project pages, I had specifically seen a project that I really liked the look of, and when I checked, the yarn that they used was a yarn that I had, which was this yarn. I just love how it's working up with all the shaping. I think this is Sirdar. I think it's called, no, it wasn't Sirdar. I did this last episode too. I called it Sirdar, but it was James C. Brett, right? James C. Brett Party Time, and it's like just a worsted weight striping yarn, and I think that is working really well with how this pattern is written. I'm getting some really interesting kind of color blocks with it. So I'm excited. Oh, I have it right here. Silly me. So here you go. Yeah, James C. Brett Party Time Chunky. It's a chunky yarn, and yeah, it's a striping yarn. So if you have some thicker striping yarn that you don't really know what to do with, make a chameleon. Why not, right? So yeah, I think that is where that is right now, and I look forward to that being done, but it might take a little while. And then finally, my last project that I have to share with you is one that I pulled out of the deep vault. I looked at the project page, and I started this back in 2019, I think. Yes, it was 2019. It was the fall of 2019. So I was within my, I think would have been first trimester with Kira. You know, if you've been pregnant, you know the first trimester, it can go all kinds of ways. And I think I had started a bunch of projects that just fell off the map after that point. I just didn't have the energy to deal with them. But this is one that I really want. So I brought it out, and I was like, okay. And I think the reason I had delayed pulling this out again is because I knew that it's not a hard pattern. I've actually made this pattern before, but there's a lot of different components to the pattern, and I knew I'd have to go through the pattern, I'd have to figure out where I was, I'd have to figure out what row I was on. There was just a lot of things I'd have to do to get started again. Like, I couldn't just pull this out of the bag and just start knitting. Like, there was a lot of stuff that had to be done. And I was right. I obviously, when I put this aside, I didn't think I was going to be putting it aside for that long, because I left it at like one of the worst parts that I could have left it. This is the exploration station. Tell me, how many of you remember me working on this project? I was so excited about this project, and I'm still so excited about this project. I love this pattern. I don't often knit patterns more than once, other than a couple of child garments that are just my go-to child garments if I need a gift or something like that. But I don't often knit, like, especially shawls. Shawls, I rarely knit shawls to begin with, so to make a shawl pattern more than once is like unheard of. But I had made a fingering weight exploration station either a year or 2 before this, and that is one knit that I use all the time. I wear it all winter. I love the way the colors play together. I love the way the different pattern sections and stitches play together. It's just a very eye-catching pattern. It's very, and it's fun to make. I remember it being, it's very well designed. It's Stephen West, so of course it's well designed, but it's a very engaging but not too difficult pattern. And so I wanted to make one again, but instead of a fingering weight, I wanted to use a worsted weight. And so that's what I had started in 2019, and I had picked out these colors. And I remember I even made this note in my project page that the sole reason for combining these colors was based on the amounts that I had of each one. So I was trying to use stash and leftovers to make this pattern. And so it all depended on what yarns I had and how much I had of those yarns to determine what I could use and what color placement. And I think, you know, considering that, I really like how these colors look together. I love this orange. Love this orange. I don't even know what this orange is. I don't know where it came from, but I love it. It's such a striking color. And orange and teal is one of my favorite combinations, so I think that's why I pulled this. But back to figuring this out. So when I pulled this out, I was in the middle of the brioche section. Of all the sections that I could have stopped and put this away at, why did it have to be in the middle of the brioche section? Because I have not done brioche for years, and if you are familiar with brioche, it's not difficult. I'm just looking for my marker. There it is. Brioche isn't difficult, but there's 2 rows. Basically, you have to do 2 rows for every single row because you have to do it in one color and then go back, do it in the second color. So it's kind of important to know exactly where you are. And then also, brioche has its own set of abbreviations, and that's something that's always I found difficult because I know my standard abbreviations and I know what to do with my standard abbreviations. But when you start talking about like barking, I think that's one of the abbreviation is a bark and a burp and all this stuff. When you start talking about that, I don't know what that is. And so I was like, I had to go back and like read over the directions and try to figure out what all these new abbreviations meant. And then I actually had my notes. There was this piece of paper in my project bag, and at least I had, you know, kind of said what which color coordinated which letter and stuff. I had some tick marks about where I was in the pattern, and then I had a little bit of I don't know if you can see, of course I had to write this on orange paper. I had a little bit of notes about what row I was on, kind of, and I had I made some notes on like the pattern instructions that had the brioche, like the barking and the burping and all of that. I had simplified it for my own brain in what you actually do, right? So if a bark was like, oh, you yarn over and slip one and do this, I wrote that out so that I'd know what that was. Anyway, so I had some notes to go on. But I was still in the middle of the brioche, and I was in the middle of so I didn't even finish the complete 2 rows to do a brioche row. I was in the middle of it. So I really had to like kind of work my way back and figure out where I was in this pattern. And so this little guy here, this is where I was when I picked it back up. I was kind of a couple of rows into the brioche. And you can see, I think you'll be able to see if I hold it back here, you can see right along there, do you see that kind of line that's there? It took me a couple of rows to get it right. I wasn't doing it, even though I thought I was following it right, I wasn't quite following it right. And it took me a couple of rows to figure out exactly what I was doing. So there's a couple of rows where, there's that one row where I started, where one of the colors is not where it's supposed to be in relation to the other color, and you can tell, like, I can tell, you can kind of see that line. I think once it's all done and once I'm wearing it, you're not going to be able to tell that, but I know it's there. And you know what, while it bothers me, and if it was an easier fix, I think it's something that I would go back and fix. The amount of work that I would have to do to like rip back brioche, and I was just, no, it wasn't going to happen. If this project would not get finished if I went back to try and fix that one row. It just wouldn't happen. So, you know what, I'm quite happy to live with it. I actually really like, this is technically the right side, this one here. I really like how it looks with that orange, the orange brioche, but yeah, the nice thing about this is that technically this, you can reverse it. You just have those purl ridges on the wrong side. So I have pulled this back out, and this is a project that I've had to I can only do a couple rows at a time. I think I'm getting close to being done the brioche section, and the next section is, I think it's called Nothing But Knit, so it's just garter stitch. So I think once I get to that section, this will go much faster. But I cannot wait. I mean, brioche can be fun. Whoa, wash your hands. Oh, you've got sand all over your hands. Oh my goodness. Toddlers. Right? Anyway. So yeah, I think that's all. I think I went through everything basically with the exploration station. I'm happy to have it out. I really want to have it finished. I It's probably going to take a couple more sessions to get through those brioche rows, because basically what I've been doing is when she's been occupied with something that she's kind of like focused on, I'll bring it out and I'll get a couple of rows done, but then I have to put it away. So it is going to take some time to get through. I think I have less than 10 rows left of the brioche to get that done, and then once I'm done that brioche, I think it'll be a lot easier to work on this project. But I really am excited to have it out again. I really want to finish it. I think it's going to be great for the fall. I think the worsted weight and just the larger size of it and the squishiness of it is going to be really awesome for when that cool weather comes back. And yeah, it'll just be another really old project that I've had lying around that I will be able to finish and enjoy. So I'm just so happy to have that back out. It's been something that's been on my mind. Like when I looked at my bingo card and I had those 2 squares that were Finish an Old Whip, I knew that this was one that I kind of wanted to tackle. And it was just kind of getting my head around, sitting down and figuring out where I was with this pattern. So I'm so glad that I was able to do that. But I think that is all that I have been working on the last couple of weeks. I think we'll take a quick break and do my bingo card update, because I do think that I've completed a few more squares, and then we'll come back and talk about goals before I sign off. All right, so here we go. It's time to do another bingo update, and I know I have a few squares that I think I can mark off from some of my recent projects. So let's see what we can do. I know I finished Ian's socks, so let's start with that. Let's get rid of that there, and we're gonna fill in the square, do our check mark. So that's one. What was something else that I finished? I finished Kira's dinosaur, and I know I wanted to put that project on one of my random project squares. You can see I still have 3, and so I have to decide strategically which one is going to benefit me more. And I think I might put it down at the bottom here, because I'm pretty confident that I'm going to sew Kira's gift bags, which means that I'll get another row here. Whereas if I put one of these, I'm pretty sure I'll do the ornament, but I'm not sure. And fiber is always a tough square for me to finish. So I think we are going to put Kira's dinosaur down here. So that's another square. And then I think I had a third square. I'm gonna have to think about that for a minute. But the other thing that I started working on again was my exploration station. And so I'm gonna put this little work in progress icon back on this Finish a Whip, because I am working on that actively now. And then, so the other one I finished is this one over here. Make 6 dishcloths. I finished 7, and I do intend on making some more, so then that will be great. But I have at least finished the 6 that I wanted to finish. So that is another square there. Did we get another, do we get any new bingos? I don't think so. No new bingos, but we're getting pretty close. So if I finish the exploration station, that's another bingo here. Once I finish Kira's gift bags, I haven't ordered the fabric yet. I'm waiting for either if I have to order another print or if Spoonflower has a sale. But once I get those done, that will be another bingo. When I finish Evan's socks, which I'll probably finish for the next episode, that will be a bingo. So we are just moseying right along on my bingo card. I'm just trying to look around and see if there's anything else that I can add on to this. I guess I can kind of put one of these little work in progress guys on one of the fibers, because I do have a skein of fibers started. I do have one bobbin started, but I think that's it for now. So that's my update. Again, if this is something new to you, this whole Crafty Bingo thing, and you're curious, I do have a thread over in the Bling Your String, a Ravelry group where anybody can join at any time. And yeah, it's just a really fun way to kind of break down some goals for the year and kind of focus your attention on certain things that you might want to complete. So yeah, if you're interested, you can pop over there. But that's it for now, and yeah, we'll see how much I can get done the next time. Okay, so I think we were able to do what, maybe 2 or 3 squares and then some progress on there. Did we get another row? We might have gotten another row. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know, but I have a feeling that we got another row. So that's how my bingo card is looking. And let's talk about what I think I'm going to get done for the next episode in a couple weeks. I think Evan's socks should definitely be done. They should be done because I've almost done the first one. I got the second one started. I think Evan's socks will be done. I think I will finish at least one of the second pairs of socks. So either Owen's second pair or Evan's second pair. I will finish one of those. Maybe I'll have another sock cast on. I seem to be wanting to cast on all the socks, so I don't know. I might have another sock cast on. Next month, it will still be June. I know in July, I want to cast on a pair of socks for myself. So I don't think I'll have those cast on. So maybe another brother pair I'll have cast on by then. Is there anything else that I'm working on that I think might be finished? I don't think I'll be done the chameleon. I think I'll have the head done. And I think I might have maybe 1 or 2 limbs done, but I don't think the whole chameleon will be done. The exploration station, if I can manage to get through that brioche, I'll be in that knitting section, that nothing but knit section. It would be very nice if I was in that section on the exploration station. I think that's all the projects that I'm working on that might have progress done on them. So let's throw in let's throw something else in. I have this spinning that I have not touched. Did I do this during Vlogmas? This might have been from Vlogmas. I have this spinning that I did months ago. I have a feeling it was during Vlogmas. I don't think I've touched it at all this current year. So I've done 1 bobbin, and I have another braid of fiber that's going to make the second bobbin, and then I want to ply them together. And I have been meaning to do this. This has been on my desk since December. And it keeps catching my eye. And it's like, hey, remember me? You need to work on me. And I keep saying, I know I need to work on you, but I don't want to do that right now, right? Because the spinning wheel, I still can't spin with Kira awake. She gets all her little fingers in there. So it has to be something that I do in the evening. And lately, I've been wanting to work on other things in the evening. I haven't felt like spinning in the evening. But I'm going to say, for the next episode, I'm going to really try and get that second bobbin done. I don't know if I'll have them plied, but I'm going to try and get that second bobbin done. And then I think we'll leave it at that. That will be my goals. Those will be my goals. And if there's anything else that I get done, it'll just be a little surprise for you. It'll be a little bonus, so that makes it a little more interesting. And yeah, that's what I've been working on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you had a wonderful weekend or evening or day wherever you are and whenever you are watching this. And you are working on all the things that bring you joy. Let me know what your favorite project is right now that you've been working on. You can let me know that below. And I think that's it for this episode. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.
What's the bubble?